eventful undercard on that show as well. But let's start this week with a quick recap of last week's big fights. I don't know if, amid your own travels, you had a chance to see Keyshawn Davis headlined last Friday. He was really setting himself up for a world title shot at lightweight. He scored a second-round TKO of Gustavo Lemos. Lemos, you may recall, he was the fighter who had just given Richardson Hitchens a really hard fight up at 140. You could conceivably give Lemos that win. We'll get a little bit more into this later when I talk about Davis in the Fighters of the Week, which is a spoiler alert, but this was a big win for Davis. It could land him a mandatory shot at the WBO title holder, who is Denis Berinchyk. The other title holders in the division are Gervonta Tank Davis, Vasily Lomachenko, and Shakur Stevenson. I wouldn't be surprised if Lomachenko retires next year and Top Rank sends its other top lightweight, Raymond Murataya, in search of his belt. Did you have a chance to see the highlights of the fight?
So I've seen the knockout. I didn't get to kind of get an opportunity to watch it because actually I was at York Hall on Friday evening, and that's when I got home about 1 o'clock UK time, and I messaged you to say, "Oh, is it Keyshawn Davis fighting tonight?" And you was like, "Yes, sir." And then you said, "Oh, he'd probably be on in about 3 or 4 hours." And then I ducked out and thought, I can't stay awake for that long. But I did see the stoppage, and it was impressive. And I saw some of the stuff around the build-up and his ring walk. And I haven't been able to watch bundles of his professional career, but that name, Keyshawn Davis, was a name which has been about for a long time. I know he did well in the amateurs. He represented Team USA at the 2020 Olympic Games, didn't he? And from memory, I think he won a silver medal. And my colleague and somebody who I know a bit, John Dennon, who used to work for Boxing News, John's always spoken very highly about him. But it looks like in the professional game, he's going to become one of those must-watch fighters who's going to be in some pretty exciting fights. Have I got the right end of the stick, as we would say on this side of the Atlantic?
You've nailed it all correct, including the silver medal that he won in the 2021 Olympics. It's really interesting because he is a top 10 contender. He's now on the verge of a title shot, even though he's not beaten another top 10 contender himself. I'd like to see him face some of these other guys, but if he gets Berinchyk, who to me is not bad, but also I would say maybe the lowest of the 4 title holders at lightweight, I think that would be a good fight for him. That was the main event. He actually had both of his brothers perform on the show as well down in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm going to go for one of the main event fighters from last week, and my fighter of the week has to be Keyshawn Davis. You know, that fight with Lemos, aside from the result, there was a lot that he did to make that fight happen when it probably shouldn't have happened. Gustavo Lemos came in. The weight limit was 135 pounds. He weighed in at 141.4. So he would have been overweight even for junior welterweight, never mind for lightweight. This was a fight in Keyshawn Davis's hometown, Norfolk, Virginia. He had a whole bunch of people on the undercard, including his brothers, who were relying on him. This was potentially earning him a title shot. It was a payday. Keyshawn Davis would have been wholly within his rights to say, this guy is way too overweight. Maybe he's trying to take advantage of things the way that Ryan Garcia did against Devin Haney. You know, there are other famous examples, including Jose Luis Castillo coming in overweight for the rematch with Diego Corrales and scoring a one-punch knockout. But Davis not only took the fight, he got the knockout. He did what he had to in circumstances that were potentially going to be difficult, and he made it look relatively easy and entertaining. So for those reasons, he is my fighter of the week.
It's great. Like we mentioned earlier on about the like when you hear about a fighter when they're an amateur, and you wonder whether they're going to do things. And I spoke about this last week about the Under-19 World Boxing Championships out in Colorado, which I covered. And there's a few names which I chucked out there, and I've been on other podcasts where I've spoken about those names. And it gets you wondering, like, out of how many of like the top amateurs, how many of them end up like headlining shows, having like highlight reel knockouts and winning proper titles? And Keyshawn Davis, as we spoke about earlier, is one of the few to have done it. So a good fighter of the week indeed.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. We will come out every Tuesday on your favorite podcasting platforms. And in between, you can follow us on social media. On Twitter, I'm at Fighting Words 2, and our show is at United Boxing Pod. Darren, you've already mentioned it before, but how can people find you?